Here are 10 woodworking tools that I wish I'd bought sooner. Thanks to Shopify for sponsoring today's video. This is not one of those 10 beginner woodworking tools videos because we've all seen those and we know what they are. I know when I started, I got all the tools and then afterwards I picked up a few tools that I was like, what have I been doing all this time without these? And those are the ones we're talking about today. Now this first tool is probably my favorite. You'll see why in just a minute. This is the Amana non-marring countersink bit with a depth stop collar on it. But as you're starting out woodworking, let's be real, you're using screws because, you're not like mortise and tenon dude or gal yet. And if you want to put screws flush with your material, you're going to be using some countersink bits. And so this is one that I started using. Actually, I think this might be the exact one that I started using right when I was a beginner. When you're drilling the hole, you're just kind of eyeballing it and trying to get the same depth on each one and get that right below the surface. And so when you drive your screws in, one might be pretty deep, another one might be a little bit more shallow, and another one might be right there at the top. And I don't know if you're like me, you're probably not, but I am neurotic and I want them all to be the same level because perfection and all that good stuff. Now the collar is the depth stop, and as I drill in, it's going to stop exactly where I need it. Now I can drill all 3 holes and they should come out perfect. And after driving in some screws, you can look at it and it looks gorgeous. And so I'm going to be rating these tools on faster, better, or easier. For this one, it is definitely faster because you don't have to eyeball it, and it is definitely better. And easier for that matter. Highly recommend this tool. And when you first start woodworking, you're probably going to have a circular saw and you're going to be breaking down plywood with that because you probably have a smaller table saw. And after using a 2x4 for a while and trying to find straight 2x4s, I picked up this guy. And this is a straight edge that is just made out of aluminum, and I used this for a long time. But let's say I wanted to cut this piece at 12 inches, I could make a little mark down here, but I can't just grab my straight edge and put it on there because the distance between the blade and the edge on this saw is 5 inches. So I need to offset the straight edge 5 inches there to make the cut right on my line. And I've got to be honest, there are definitely times where I have not done that when I was using a straight edge and made my cut either 5 inches too long or 5 inches too short. And probably the thing I hate most is dust collection, because even though it does have a dust port on the back, it is wide open right here. So it is just a disaster as far as dust collection, and you might capture 50% if you're lucky. So I waited far too long before I got tool number 2, which is the track saw. A track saw is so much better than a circular saw and a straight edge in just every way. First off, the dust collection is amazing. It's got the little boot here on the back, but also it is fully enclosed, so it really captures a lot of dust. And you can even get little 3D printed caps like this one from my buddy Drew Witt that'll go right into this little dust port and let you capture even more dust. Now, the dust collection alone on a track saw is enough for me to buy one. That just makes it way better. But what also makes it faster and easier is the actual track. There's no more offset. I can put this right down on that 12-inch line and just line it up exactly where I want my cut, and then just cut straight down the line. And your cut's going to actually be better too because it's got this little strip on here that acts as a tear-out preventer, and there's even a little tear-out preventer here on the bottom of the saw to also help. I think I was into woodworking for over 10 years before I got a track saw, but it makes it faster, better, and easier. Should have done that one way earlier. And one of the first things you probably bought was a drill, and you probably used it for just about everything. Drilling, driving, mixing paint, whatever. And I did that for sure when I started out. Then I upgraded to a driver. But that's not the tool I wish I had bought earlier, because there are different kind of drivers. Let me show you. One thing I've always disliked about impact drivers is how loud they are. And when you're out in the open, it's fine. But if you're putting screws inside a cabinet or something, it starts echoing around, it can get really loud. I've got a decibel meter right here, so I figured we should just go ahead and measure it. If I hit this little max button, it will actually say the max decibels it's at. And now we'll drive a screw and see how loud it is. 106.2. That is really loud. There's a whole decibel scale. That's probably like in the, jet engine level noise or screaming crowd in a stadium. That's pretty loud. And that's why I replaced my loud impact driver with this hydraulic impact driver. Basically, it's the exact same thing, except there's actually oil in there that dampens the impacts, or at least dampens the sound. But the noise level is way lower. So I'm going to switch out the bit from the old one to the new one. And I'm going to zero out the decibel meter and then run this one at the same distance from it. We'll see how loud it is. All right, let's check that out. Ooh, 94.6. So this hydraulic impact driver is over 10 decibels quieter than the normal impact driver. So the decibel scale is not linear, so that's not just like a 10 or 12% difference. That's actually something much more than that, which I don't know, which we'll put on the screen somewhere here. So that is a huge reduction, and the hydraulic driver is definitely better, maybe not faster and easier, but for sure better than the impact driver. And if you're driving a whole bunch of screws over the course of a day, that could really make a difference. When I first moved into this shop 10 years ago, this was the setup for my miter saw. That's right, it's just sitting on a piece of MDF on top of these exact sawhorses. Of course, it was a little nicer because I had a nice laminated piece of MDF that was my mom's old sewing table. Now, if you've ever done a lot of miter saw cuts on a rickety setup like that, then you can feel my pain. So when I built my mobile miter saw station, that was a huge upgrade. The main thing was outfeed and then having a stop block. So that mobile miter saw station did me well for a very long time. But the next step after that, I really wish I had it done earlier. Now this one is not so much a tool as it is a setup for the tool, and I know it is a luxury because not everybody is going to have the space to do this. But building a miter saw station that is stationary and has a lot of outfeed was a huge game changer for me. And this is in the garage. These are only 20-inch deep cabinets, so even if you have a garage and you're still parking cars in, you can get by with it. But let me show you why this is such a game changer. Now, you can do this setup in a lot of different configurations, but I really like having the saw kind of right in the middle so I can make cuts on either side. Now I've got 75 inches of cabinets over here on the left, and then 6 feet of cabinets over there on the right. And the end of these cabinets goes into a little cubby because it's a corner, so I can get an 8-foot board and hang it all the way over there and make an end cut right on my saw. And the thing I like best about this is I have a fenceless setup. So I have a little T-track that sets back from the front fence here of the miter saw, and then my stop block can move up and down. And I have a little flip stop on it, so I can put it down and reference it for a cut. But if I want to lay something down and not use the stop block, I just flip it back up. That's a really nice feature to have, and there's no fence to get in the way, and you can get repeatable cuts all the way down to about 7 feet. Adding in this miter saw station definitely made things faster, better, and easier. And if you can at all swing it, I highly recommend it. Getting a compressor and a nailer was one of the first things that I did when I started getting into woodworking, and not just because this nail gun has my namesake to it, but so I could do things like this. Sorry. But you realize really quickly that having a compressor going off all the time is really annoying, especially if you're trying to film videos. And if you're trying to work your way around a table, you've got this cord that you kind of have to drag over, and now it's getting in the way of your project, and it's just not that convenient, although they are fairly inexpensive. But as soon as I switched over to cordless nailers, these are a big game changer because they're just so convenient. They're definitely a little bit heavier, but even something as inexpensive as this Ryobi one, you can still get the same bump fire. And I do like this Milwaukee one a little bit better, kind of because it sounds really awesome too. The cordless technology has come a long way, and these cordless models are just as capable and as powerful as their corded companions without the compressor. They will definitely make your work faster and easier because you don't have to wait for the pressure to build up in the tank, and also you don't have to move around the cord and get it out of the way or rake it over your project and mess something up. So if you can swing it for the money, I would highly advise grabbing a cordless nailer. Now, woodworking has been around for a long time, and so there's not that much innovation that really comes out. But about 10 years ago, the compact trim router came out. Actually, Bosch Colt was the first one. And this was a huge game changer in woodworking to have this nice small compact size and be able to do things like round over edges, and I use these a ton. And just like the cordless nailer, going from a corded compact router to a cordless compact router is a nice upgrade. But that's not actually the thing I wish I had bought earlier. What I wish I had bought earlier was actually a better cordless compact router. And there are some big differences between these two routers that make this one so much better. If you've been around the channel at all, then you're probably going to know this first one, and that is dust collection for me. I am a huge stickler for dust collection. This one does have a dust collection port, which I was super excited about, but the front is totally wide open. So the dust collection is okay, but there's still a lot that gets out this front side. So when I saw this one, I was really excited because the entire base is enclosed. So we've got the port here, but then it is fully enclosed, and then this backside, so there's no place for the dust to go out, at least in the top. Of course, it's still going to come out at the bottom, but we're going to get way better dust collection. So that is a huge positive for this guy. Now this next one, if you're handling the tool properly, you shouldn't have to worry about it, but it is a nice feature, and that is the stopping. So if I turn this guy on, you see when I turn it off that it has a little while to spool down, maybe takes 2 or 3 seconds as it goes. And so that bit is still spinning, and if I put it down, then I could gouge my table or, something worse. Now this guy has an electronic brake on it, so if I turn it on and then turn it off, it stops immediately. So that is really nice. If I turn it off, I know I can just put it down immediately and not have to worry about where that bit is and if it's still spinning or not. Now the last thing is the ergonomics, and the battery form factor on this guy is quite a bit wider, so it can get a little more tippy, especially if you get a bigger battery on there, versus this guy is more compact and up and down, so it's not going to want to tip as you're going around, especially on a little narrow surface. So for all the tools today that I'm showing, these are just the ones that I've been using for years in my shop. Different brands could work great for you. It's more about the options and what they allow you to do than it is about the specific brands. A lot of my woodworking projects are painted, either fully or partially, whether I have a painted base with a nice hardwood top, or if I just have something fully painted like a dresser or a closet organizer. And I have been known to just use a paintbrush and maybe a roller for a lot of that painting. And that is just such a huge time suck when you have to go paint everything by hand. So to save time, I upgraded to an HVLP paint sprayer, and HVLP stands for high volume, low pressure. And basically this will just spray the paint out here. And this is just a really inexpensive one that plugs in and it just runs off the little compressor up here in the top. Now this is a good place to start, and it does an okay job. It just doesn't have as much power in here to really atomize the paint, and you really have to thin things down with this. So after waiting far too long, I upgraded to this paint sprayer, which has its own dedicated turbine in it. So the turbine is in this case part here, and then it has the hose, so this will force the air and it just plugs in right here. And then it does have 2 little canisters with different size nozzles on it. And there are a lot more options on this setup as far as the flow rate, as well as the shape and the direction of the nozzle that you can get with this. Now let me turn this on. One of the things I love about this specifically is you don't hear anything because you can turn it on right here at the gun. So it's not always spraying. You can just turn it on and turn it off right at the gun head. That's a really nice feature because when you're spraying a project and after you stop pulling that trigger, sometimes you just don't want that extra air flowing out because it can mess up the paint job or it can blow other debris and material into your finish. I use this guy mostly for paint and for stain for outdoor projects, as you can see with the nice speckled finish here. But I don't use this for polyurethanes or clear finishes just because I don't want to have clear and paint going through the same machine. So I actually still haven't really gotten one that's specifically for finishing that I think there's a lot of other great options with 4 and 5 stage turbines that'll be great for applying things like lacquer or polyurethane or any other clear finish. Now, a good paint sprayer definitely checks off all the boxes of faster, better, and easier. It's just so much superior to doing a brush finish, especially if you have a lot of different parts that you need to get into or weird surfaces. Norm Abram has drilled into our heads that there is
no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses.
And I would completely agree. I am a big stickler for safety, and I think following close behind that is ear protection. But the third one I think a lot of people overlook, and that is protecting your lungs with something like a dust mask. This is actually a little bit of an upgraded one because it has the little valve here so that it won't fog up your glasses. But these are great for protecting you from fine dust, and you should be wearing these whenever you're doing something that's really dusty. But these can only go so far just because they're fairly generic in the shape of them, and it just has the cloth liner on it. So I started wearing an upgraded dust mask, which is like this little guy right here, which you can get a lot better fit with because it can go around the back. It does have the nice little valves on it, and it's all adjustable, and it's just nice and easy to use. So fairly similar to that. But the real upgrade that I should have gone to earlier is a full respirator. And this guy is awesome. This is a half latch respirator, and you see me using this in a lot of my videos, especially if I am spraying finish or anything like that. And that's a big thing also, is that you need to get the right one. And they make different air filters for this. So I have some of the pink ones that you see me wear a lot in the videos. It's actually at the new property right now, so I don't have it. So you really want to be using the organic vapor filters when you're applying finish and you're using something that has a lot of VOCs, if the finish smells really strong, it's probably got a lot of VOCs, and especially if you start getting a headache when you're working around it, that's where these will save you. Because we don't need to lose any more brain cells than we already are by watching so much YouTube. The great thing about the respirator is it has this full rubber seal, and so you can put this on.
And there, now I sound like Darth Vader. Luke, I am your father. It was not actually the line in the movie, but you know, that's another story.
And I love this half-lap feature on this mask that you can pull it on and off easily without having to take it all off. So if you need to take a sip of Mountain Dew or something. Now the respirator is only really going to be better, not so much faster or easier, but it is a really important better, and it really helps just keep my lungs clean so I'm not coughing the next day after I'm milling up a bunch of lumber. A chisel is probably one of the most useful woodworking tools, and basically anything that cuts is pretty much just a form of a chisel. And this was one that I got from my grandfather, which was one of the first ones I started using, which was pretty awesome, but it's got a nice little bend to it. So after that, I picked up some ones from Harbor Freight, which are horrible. And then I upgraded to a quite nicer chisel, which was this Irwin that has great steel on it, and then even eventually to a socket chisel, which this thing just cuts like butter. But one thing these all have in common is I need to sharpen them. Now, sharpening chisels can be a little bit intimidating, and I was definitely intimidated, and I didn't want to get one of these sharpening stones. I really liked the scary sharp method, which is basically using sandpaper. So I made up this little tile, and this actually has some little diamond lapping paper on it. Then I could use one of these cheap little sharpening jigs and put my chisel in there, but of course you have to get the angle, so you have to measure it and have a little jig for it. And then once you have that, then you can go in and just sharpen right here on the lapping paper. And I'm mainly a power tool woodworker, so I don't get a ton of enjoyment out of sharpening things like some people do, so I got this instead. This is the WorkSharp 3000, and no, I didn't just make that name up. That's what this is actually called. But this is basically a power tool for sharpening your chisels and plane blades, and it is awesome. Now just this little guy right here is the WorkSharp, and this is just a jig I built around it to hold all the accessories. And basically the way that it works is it has these glass plates on top, and it spins them, and you put the chisel against it, and it lines it up so it will perfectly sharpen the angle you want. So I have a series of different plates here, and you start up with one. So one side is 120, then you can go over to 400. And that's great for when you're sharpening a new chisel or bringing a really beat up one back to life. But if you just need a little tune-up, you can go down, and I will go down to the 3600. So we've got 1000 grit on this side and 3600 grit on this side. So now I can put this onto the WorkSharp. This is where you put the chisel in, and you can adjust the angle. I've got it at 25 degrees, which is where I like my chisels. Now if I want to put a new edge on this guy, I will just highlight the tip here in black so I'll know it's been taken off or not. Then you turn it on, and with a few strokes, it'll be sharp. So you can see here with the tip of the chisel now is all shiny new metal, which means that is sharp. Now I can move on to the next grits. Now I definitely wouldn't say this does a better job than an expert with a whetstone, but I think this for sure is faster and easier, and it works great for what I need it to do, which is basically just to have a nice sharp chisel that can cut wood easily and not have to just sit there pounding away at it. Now there's one woodworking process that I think we can almost all agree is the absolute worst, and that is sanding. And there are some things that'll make it easier, like great sandpaper or a little hook and loop backer for it. And of course, one of the first things you should get is a random orbital sander, because that's going to make your life a lot easier. And you can even upgrade to the next level and get a 6-inch sander with an attached dust extractor like I have here. And these are all great things, but that's not the thing I wish I had bought earlier. It's this guy, the drum sander. Now, a drum sander is basically just like a robot that does your sanding for you, and don't we all want that? So it's a lot like a planer, and it has a drum in the middle, which you set to a certain height, and a conveyor belt that feeds it through. And it just sands off that layer, and you just keep going until you get to the level that you want, or until you get everything to a clear surface. Now, the two places that the drum sander helped me the most were when I was doing in-grain cutting boards, because those are just a nightmare to sand by hand, and also doing tabletops because it is open-ended, so you can put it through and then go to the other side. So coffee tables for sure. You do need to have a much larger machine to do something like a big tabletop, but they come in so handy. It is really nice to have. Now, I would say that this is faster, better, and easier, but it comes at a price. And if you are doing woodworking for a business, then for sure you're gonna be able to get that payback on it, because it's just gonna save you so much time. If you want to see some tools under $20 that I love, I've got a video queued up for you right there. A big thank you to the FTBT Builders Club. I'm Brad. Get out there and build something awesome.